So it turns out spot reduction might actually not be a myth after all. I'm talking about being able to potentially target that fat in a specific area. One of the popular areas to target fat, the abdominal region, that stubborn belly fat. What a turn of events. I mean, do you guys remember people who were claiming you could spot reduce got like banished? There were literally like physical fights over this topic. Like relationships were broken, and then a few right people finally said, it's a myth, you cannot spot reduce. And for some reason, just everybody was like, yes, it's a myth, and everyone just believed it. Well, you know what? It turns out some recent literature came about that says, well, spot reducing might not actually be a myth after all. And you know what? I don't even care anymore because, you know, 1 year literature is going to say this, the next year it's going to say another thing. I don't care about that. But what I do care about, and what I do want to share with you guys today, are my observations that I had with my body over the last several years of gaining weight, losing weight, gaining weight, losing weight. You know, the typical bulk cut cycles. And what I noticed, specifically regarding that stubborn belly fat, and the times where it seemed like I was losing weight, but more of that belly fat was sticking around, and then the times where I lost weight, or even gained weight, but it seemed like, you know, my stomach stayed tight or got tighter. And I really was like diving in and thinking about the things I did specifically and didn't do, and then I was comparing it to some of the recent literature, and I realized there are some things that one might be able to do to better your chances at reducing the fat from, in this case, the belly, or I guess you could apply these techniques to any other region, spot reduce. Potentially target fat in a specific region and or just make that region look tighter as you achieve your physique goals this summer and beyond. Let's dive into it, but you gotta focus. Now, before we get into my experience and what I found worked for me that seemed like it targeted that belly fat, I believe it targeted that belly fat, I do want to take a quick look at this study that has recently been published. So look, it says right here, the existence of spot reduction, exercise-induced local body fat reduction has been debated for half a century. This has been an ongoing thing. Anyways, they took 16 overweight males, they randomized them, they had one group do abdominal endurance exercise and the other do treadmill running, and they did DEXA scans, blah, 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 and they found that, let's just go to the conclusion here, the abdominal endurance exercise group utilized more local fat than the treadmill running group, indicating that spot reduction exists in adult males. Who needs to read more than that? I'm certain you could probably read through that and find some arguments as to why, oh, this or that or the other thing, as always. But let's just think about this logically for a second. Doesn't it make sense that if you were to utilize a specific muscle group, that there might be some kind of local utilization of the fat cells in that region? Wouldn't it just make sense? I mean, that's just using logical sense. I know physiology doesn't necessarily work exactly how you assume it to work, but wouldn't that just make sense? Now, I believe that whole frame of logic right there is why spot reduction has been so believable before so many people debunked it. Well, it turns out we might need to undebunk it, okay? And maybe things are a little bit more logical than we were told. But you know what? There's probably a gray area in there somewhere or another, and that's kind of what I found from my experience. There's kind of a gray area. It's not as simple as just like do sit-ups and fat comes off the stomach, but there is maybe a little bit of truth to that from my experience. So now I'm gonna dive into my experience and what I noticed throughout all these bulk cut cycles and throughout all the other experiments I did throughout the last couple of years. So I actually made two categories here. The first category were the times where I was losing weight, but it felt like my stomach was staying fat even though the weight was coming down. And I was getting leaner elsewhere, but like that belly fat just seemed like it was almost getting worse sometimes. Now, the other category here includes the patterns of things that I did during a time and the times where I noticed that my weight was going down, but also my stomach belly fat was going down as well at the same rate or maybe even a faster rate. And in this category, there were times where I was also trying to gain weight and it didn't seem like my belly fat was going up really much at all as I was gaining weight. I was almost like lean gaining. But with this being said, I want you to remember this is just based on my experience and what has worked for me. So some of these things you might need to tune one way or another for you, but it's gonna help you open your mind to the possibilities of spot reduction, or at least just leaning out evenly without skinny fat leaning out. You know what I'm saying? But I think there's actually some interesting things I'm gonna share with you, also based on research as well, that have to do with spot reduction and toning. Oh my gosh, I said toning. Yo, it's 2025 and toning is back. Now also, before I dive into these specifics, I just wanna say all of the losing weight phases have been done so in a calorie deficit. The basics still stand, right? That is, I ate less calories than I burned off, so I lose weight. Now with that being said, let's dive into it. The first experience I've had, the good and the bad, exercising. The first point, running. Now I don't just want to single out running, because I've noticed this same exact thing happen to me before when I'm doing too much of any exercise for too much volume throughout the week, weeks on end, week after week after week. It's like I'm just doing too much. It's almost like my body can't recover fast enough. I'm losing weight, but my belly, my stomach fat, it just seems like it's still there, and it seems like it's never going away. And it's just, I feel awful, to be honest with you. And I think there's a combination of several different things going on as to why my physique ends up looking like this and my belly fat doesn't end up coming off, even though I'm exercising out the wazoo and I'm still in a deficit. So let's just call this whole category of bad exercising, too much running, and just too much other exercise, just too much exercise volume. We'll just call it overtraining. Now that's gonna be different for everybody, but there are some other symptoms of overtraining that you might experience, or I at least experience when I do this, other than just looking and feeling skinny fat. And that could be irritability, restlessness, elevated like tension throughout the day, and just always feeling super achy and sore in the muscles, joints, etc. Almost feeling like kind of constantly ill. It's not a good thing, and it's not good for the body. So now on the other side, looking at overall exercise, what's the approach that I've noticed has allowed me to lean down, but also just tighten up in the waist at a consistent rate, if not even faster. And simply put, that's just a balanced exercise routine consisting of some kind of resistance training and a little bit of cardio, maybe even a decent amount of cardio, but not going like full over the top and just like deciding I'm gonna become a runner and like trying to run a marathon's worth of volume in a week, which, you know, I know it's like, see, that's the thing. It's like, I'm like, oh, people run a marathon in one day, right? So it's like, well, I can at least do it in 1 week. You know, like how hard could that be? Well, it turns out if you don't run a lot and you try to run 25 miles, let's just say, in a week, it's actually a lot. I did it. I even made a video on it, and I tried to keep my running volume up after that, and it just tore me down. And I just noticed I was getting like this like skinny fat look. It wasn't good. But on the other hand, I found that when I incorporated a little bit of running, right, 2 miles or under, I've noticed for me that works really well. I found that I can recover from that better. I also feel more balanced. I don't feel any of those overtraining symptoms I talked about earlier, and I do feel like it helps burn the fat, right? Because cardiovascular exercise does help burn fat, but for some reason, when you do too much, maybe it has to do with hormonal imbalance and a whole host of other issues, but just keeping things balanced and healthy, that's gonna be one of the key big factors here. Is doing stuff more healthily, well, that seems to keep the weight coming off at this like even rate around the body. Okay, now in this first comparison, the bad versus the good regarding exercise, in the bad phase, I noticed that the weight was coming off unevenly, it seemed like, and it was staying around the midsection. Now in the good size, it just felt like the weight was coming off more evenly overall. So that's not exactly spot training, but recently, through experimentation, I have noticed that when keeping things healthy, healthily balanced regarding exercise, incorporating more abdominal training, well, it seems like it almost targets the midsection better than not doing it. Because I've had phases, even when having a balanced workout, not training abdominals and then training abdominals. Well, the times I am actually training abdominals, it seems like it's almost targeting that belly fat better. Is it actually? Well, based on that study I shared with you in the beginning of this, that might actually be a little bit true. Adding in abdominal training, it seems like it targets that area just a little bit more. But there might also be some other things going on in this region that might be adding to this effect. You see, there is some other research, some other literature that I was looking at regarding collagen synthesis and the activation of muscle tissue. So just being physically active. And what I found out, and this is kind of like, we're kind of reaching here, we're kind of putting together a puzzle, but I think there's something to be said here. When being active and moving and working out specific muscle groups, well, it signals your body to produce more collagen, right, to repair and recover. But there might be some kind of localized effect. And this is just a theory and just an observation, and I just want to ask you guys what you guys think about this, because I'm very observant. Muscle groups that I work out more, or maybe somebody else works out more, well, those muscle groups that they work out quite frequently, it always seems like the skin and like that muscle tone around that area seems tighter. It seems tighter, and just like tighter skin, tighter muscle tone around areas they work out more frequently. Why is that? Maybe it has to do with this whole collagen synthesis theory, I guess we can call it. The fact that your body may locally produce signaling to make more collagen, have more collagen synthesis in specific areas that are trained for recovery and repair for those specific muscles and tendons, but it might also flow out to the skin, that skin area. So what I'm getting to here, in my experience, from adding in more abdominal training compared to when I wasn't adding in abdominal training, well, it just seems like my abdominal region is more tighter, skin included. Really, that's just me and that's just my experience. I kind of want to get your feedback on that one. I want to know what you guys think about that, and if you think I'm onto something here. Okay, the next one, this one's very important. You hear it all the time, but I actually think it has an exact role in somehow reducing like belly fat better than not doing this. And what am I talking about? I'm talking about getting good sleep. Over the past several years, there have been many times where I've gotten terrible sleep. Many phases where I've gotten terrible sleep for weeks. Whether I'm trying to bulk up or cut down, it seems like all those times where I've gotten terrible sleep, it really does seem like there is more of an accumulation of belly fat, or if it is a lean out phase, it seems like the belly fat just doesn't go away. It like goes away from other areas, but not from the stomach. Now, more recently, as I've discovered some techniques and things to do to help me get better sleep, getting better sleep for weeks on end now, I've noticed as I'm leaning out ever so slightly, it seems like it's coming off of the midsection just as good as it's coming off the rest of the body. Now, why might this be? I was looking into this, and the one thing I came across had to do with cortisol, and it seemed like when you don't have good sleep, your cortisol levels might be higher, elevated for longer. Now, the whole topic about cortisol is actually, I feel like it's kind of skewed, like cortisol is always bad. Well, cortisol, it seems like, is good at certain times. You want to have acute cortisol, like when you do intense exercise or when you need to like fight or flight, right? You want to have that cortisol. It has beneficial properties like anti-inflammation. I think it helps it raises your blood sugar, I believe, to help give you that instant energy for when you need it. But having a chronically elevated level of cortisol, like it's not going back down when it should be down, well, that can lead to problems. And from what I was looking into, it seems like it can lead to higher amounts of belly fat. I was kind of like in a little stressed out phase, maybe just staying up too late, just not having a good circadian rhythm, and it was causing me to not get good sleep, and that was causing me to have and that was causing me to not get good, it was a spiral out of control, right? But throughout that whole spiral, I think that was causing my cortisol levels to be relatively elevated chronically, at least to some point, and I think that might have had something to do with the belly fat. Like my body was probably storing that fat in that area, just in case it needed it, because I was in this like survival mode almost. That whole like your body goes into survival mode and and it kind of sounds gimmicky. Well, there might be actually some truth to that as well, at least from my experience, especially with bad sleep. On the other hand, with the good sleep, I feel a lot better, right? I just feel a lot better, and I'm noticing aesthetically that belly fat seems to be coming off at the same rate it's coming off elsewhere as I'm leaning out. Very important too. I want to just put a reminder out there. It's not like I just do these, less exercises and I'm getting good sleep and all of a sudden I'm just getting leaner. There's also a slight calorie deficit with both categories, okay? With both categories to get leaner. But like I said, with one category, even in the calorie deficit, I'm getting lighter, but I'm not looking right in the midsection. All right, what about specific foods that might have been leading to an improper cut, we can call it, or just things going bad as I'm getting leaner versus things going good as I'm getting leaner? Well, there's been an interesting combination of food that I've been playing around with that I've noticed might be causing me an issue when it comes to getting lean and the belly fat sticking around. That combination of foods is a lot of starchy carbs with high fat dairy. For some reason, I've noticed that even when I'm in a deficit overall for the day, for the week, if I'm eating a lot of like rice combined with cheese, even if I keep the calories low, for some reason, that combination, I just always notice the next day after I have it, I seem more water retentive in this area, and it seems like the belly fat just isn't coming off at the same rate as if I just don't have the cheese with the rice, right? If I just don't have the cheese with the rice. Now, upon looking into this, I came across dairy potentially having some very estrogenic-like effects, especially like high-fat dairy. But I have actually done experiments where I've had a decent amount of dairy and I didn't notice this happening. It only seems like when I combine it with the high starchy carbohydrates, for some reason it causes me an issue. For instance, I remember doing the meat and fruit diet and I had a lot of cheese with like high fatty meats, and I didn't notice this happening. But when I've had phases where I've been cutting down and I've been adding like a lot of Parmesan cheese to my rice and chicken, it just something doesn't seem right the next day. And if I do it for several days in a row, even if I'm in a deficit, like I said, it just seems like it stays there. So I don't know exactly what is going on here, but for me going forward, and maybe if you're just wondering, it could be something to look into, and I'm asking you, if you guys, what do you think is going on here? When I avoid having a combination of high fat dairy and starchy carbs, it seems to work better for me in a deficit, regardless of the calories, Okay, what about specific supplements? Everybody wants to know this one. What specific supplement could I take to just burn that belly fat off? In my experience, I don't think any of these supplements that I've taken have actually targeted belly fat specifically, but I think some of these supplements help me have more energy, maybe even target just fat in general, maybe one way or another, or just make you have more energy. But I haven't noticed any of these supplements like negatively affecting the belly fat. And the major supplements I'm talking about, Tongkat Ali, I swear by that one now, but I only take it 4 times a week, specifically usually only on workout days, because I've noticed when I take Tongkat too consistently for too many weeks, it's like I just get used to it and it completely stops working. So I do 4 days on, 3 days off a week, and it keeps things cycling so I can take it longer before, man, it's usually like 3 or 4 months, and then I'll want to take like 2 to 4 weeks off to just reset myself before I take it again. So Tongkat Ali, that's the first one I noticed. More energy, more strength, more like vitality, and that just helps keep the weight in check. I don't think it targets the belly fat, but I think it just helps the weight come off overall for me, or just stay lean, stay leaner. And that's another thing I do want to touch on at the end of this video. I'll get to it, but what's the weight goal here? Okay, I'm going to touch on that at the end of this video. We're not trying to get too lean. We're not trying to get too lean, bro. Another supplement that I was looking at last year, I was taking for a while, and then actually just stopped taking it as I went into this winter, and that was carnitine L-tartrate. I mean, I stopped taking it in the winter. I haven't really taken it since. Maybe I should add it back in. Look into carnitine L-tartrate if you're interested. That was one that I was like, regarding fat burning, and that's one I might look into again actually going forward. Now, these final 2 are interesting things that might not necessarily be spot fat reducing. They might have a little bit of play, or at least one of them might have a little bit of play, but more so geared towards toning the skin, toning the area. So this is kind of going back up into, exercising that specific region and like noticing maybe like tighter skin in regions you exercise more frequently. Well, that might give the look of like less belly fat, or just give the look of like a tighter stomach, right? Some other techniques that might also do that I've noticed benefits from red light exposure, or red light therapy exposure to like the stomach region, and just 5 minutes a day, like 5 times a week. I've noticed in the areas I apply it to specifically, and I don't necessarily just target the stomach all the time. I'm applying it to actually more like areas that I feel like are achy and injury, because I notice like a joint health like benefit from using this red light therapy device. So yeah, there are many times where I don't specifically use it on the stomach because maybe I'm targeting like my upper shoulder or like back or like legs or like knees or something like that. But in times where I'm just kind of doing the standard like just full upper body, front, back, or side, even side red light treatments, I notice like the skin, like it's not super crazy, but it seems like there's just a little bit more skin health, maybe a little bit more skin elasticity here. And I'm kind of in an uphill battle, right? As I'm getting older, as I'm 34 years old, going on 35 in freaking June. But yeah, what I'm saying is like, maybe has like a slight toning effect we can add to this whole entire potentially good column here. Toning. And then one more thing I did look at last year, but was very interesting. I kind of stopped doing it just because, like, dude, doing so many biohacks and all this stuff. But maybe something I want to look into again was topical skin creams. And now, once again, I don't think this necessarily deeply penetrates the skin and targets the fat in the area, but it might have some kind of skin toning effect. And the creams that might do this, from my research that I looked at, are creams potentially containing like, I think it's green coffee bean extract and or just coffee in general. I was doing this thing where I was brewing a very dense coffee and I was mixing it with my MSM cream and I was applying it to my stomach region. And I don't think it burned my fat. I really don't think it did. But I think there was like a skin health benefit from maybe the caffeine and the antioxidants in the coffee that I noticed doing this, a couple of weeks. So maybe something to look into there. I can't say definitely, like absolutely it was all because of that. I just don't want to leave that out because that was something I did last year a lot that I noticed potentially had an effect at targeting a specific region for tightening it up. Because if you haven't noticed already, throughout all this fluctuation of like the belly not losing the fat and then it, losing more fat, the skin, it suffers, right? And there's some things I've noticed that I do that seem like it tighten the skin and some things that I notice I do that also loosen the skin, and they're very correlated to the same things that seem like they target the fat. I think it's all one. Now, with that being said, what is the goal? In my opinion, as a natural athlete, from my experience, when I get to about like an estimated, I say an estimated what looks like 12% body fat, that's where I feel the best and that's where I want to stay. I don't think I really ever want to get any leaner than that. And I know a lot of people want to get like shredded and whatnot, but maybe just think like 12%, you're looking lean, you got a lean waist, you've got muscle definition, maybe like some decent vascularity, but you also still have energy and you don't have death face. You know what I'm saying? You still can retain some. You talk too long, bro. Holy smokes. Let's borrow this one. You don't have death face, you know what I'm saying? Where you're like just so sunken in and look so tired because you're way too lean. And like 12%, also as a natural athlete, having some body fat is good. So I actually encourage not going beneath this, for myself at least, because you just start feeling terrible, right? But having too much body fat as a male, and that's another thing, for females the percentage is different. 12% would probably be far too lean for a female, 12% body fat, so maybe it's more like 20 or 25%. So yeah, whatever the female probably equivalent to 12% male is here. But that with all this being said, if you have too much body fat, you're also going to feel terrible as well. And I've been there. I've definitely been there. Let's just say that, okay? So I think the goal for me is to get into this like range of like 15 to 18%, 18% at the most. I think I've been over that before and I didn't feel good. But let's just say 15 to 12% and kind of play with that. But doing so in a way, like if I kind of clip over 15 and need to come down, where I'm doing these things on the healthy side to where the weight's coming back off and it's coming off the belly at least as fast as it is the rest of the body. Hope this video helps you out. Let me know what you thought about all this. Let me know if you've noticed any techniques or anything you've done or haven't done or one way or the other, and how it potentially affected specific regions of fat on the body, because this is a very interesting topic. Literature is starting to turn around on it. There's gonna be fights online. No, I don't know what's gonna even happen about this. I just remember there was a time, and I'm certain you could too, man, people got so upset about this topic. It was crazy. And now it's like, dude, like, oh my gosh, you know what I'm saying? Dude, it's like the whole, I could go off on a tangent. If this was a podcast, I could just talk and talk and talk about the hypocritical back and forths and like he said, she said, and now it's this way, but it was that way. And dude, make up your minds, people. Make up your minds, or don't make them up. Just keep questioning. Anyways, hope you all have a great day. Stay tuned, more videos coming out. Peace. I will see you all in the next video.